everyone, and welcome back to Clara Sews Vintage. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 tips for successful sewing. So I have been sewing for most of my life, but I have been seriously making my own garments for about the last 3 years. So today I thought that it would be fun to share and helpful, hopefully, for all of you to share my top 5 things that I have found really make me successful and make me happy with the things that I make. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into the tips before I start rambling. So my first tip is know your fabric. So I think that this is one of the things that has come back to bite me the most when I was first starting to get into sewing as a teenager. And I think that this is something that kind of waylaid my deep interest in sewing, because I would dabble in it and make things, and I would be really, enjoying the process, really enjoying making things, and I would make a mock-up, and I'd be really happy with it, and I would get the final garment done, and I just wouldn't love it. I just didn't feel like it looked the way that I had planned that it would look, and I just really wasn't happy with my final result. And what would happen, the problem was, I didn't understand the fabric that I was working with. So I remember one of my very worst fails in particular was, I believe I was in maybe a freshman or a sophomore in high school, and I decided I was going to make an Easter dress for myself. And I made the mock-up, and it looked really good, and I was really excited, and I made the mock-up just out of an old sheet or something, I believe, or some quilting cotton, and I really liked it. And it was just a simple fit and flare, a very simple two-dart bodice, and with a gathered skirt. This was before I got into vintage, so it was just, I think it was a butterick pattern, modern, whatever. I made the mock-up, really loved it, and I decided to make it out of chiffon. Was it chiffon? No, rayon challis. Now, the fabric that I had used, like I said, I used a mock-up. I used an old sheet to make the mock-up, and that had some structure to it. The rayon challis was extremely water-like almost. It was very drapey, and it just kind of didn't have any body of its own. It was just very drapey and kind of silky feeling, and it looked like a bag on me. It looked like a gunny sack. I looked terrible in it because it didn't have any shape. The fabric from the cotton sheet that I had used had shape, and it gave the garment shape. The rayon challis was very drapey and didn't lend any structure of its own to the garment. So something that, like a darted bodice, is not going to look nearly as good in something so extremely drapey, at least not on my body shape. So it's really, really important to know your fabric, to get to know different fabrics. Another example of this is when I was in high school for a sewing class, I made a flannel shirt. Again, I made the mock-up, and I got it to fit nicely, and I was really happy with it. But then when I made the shirt, I never ended up wearing it, because the flannel that I used was a really thick, heavy flannel, and it felt very bulky and uncomfortable when I made it. So by looking at the flannel shirt, it was beautiful and it looked lovely, but it just wasn't very comfortable to wear because it was so bulky. So those are kind of two sides of the extreme. I had a fabric that honestly probably would have done better as the out of the flannel that I used to make the shirt because it had structure. And then I had, so this dress that needed more structure, and then I had the flannel shirt that I should have used a lighter weight flannel that had a little bit more drape to it, and that would have been a lot more comfortable. So it's really, really, really important to understand your fabrics, to understand the weight of the fabric, the body that the fabric has, if something has any stretch to it or not. Those are really important things to understand about materials. Now, getting to know different fabrics can be a bit of a trial and error process. Even though those two in particular, and I had many other projects like that were very frustrating, they also served to teach me a lot about different materials. So normally, during non-COVID, I would suggest that you go out and go into fabric stores and you pet fabric. You feel it. You feel the drape of different things and really get to know what different names of fabric, kind of so you can associate a name of a fabric like a gabardine or a cotton shirting or something, so you can really associate what different fabrics feel like with their names. Now, during this time of COVID, when we shouldn't be going out and about as much, mood fabric specifically I can think of. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but I know for sure Mood Fabrics has a really great sample program. So you can order samples of fabric. I believe they're $1.50 per sample. And if you place an order, you get a certain number of free samples, I believe, depending on the dollar amount that you're spending. So you can buy samples of fabric. So you can buy a sample of a twill, of a gabardine, of a wool suiting, of a cotton shirting, of a flannel, and you can have these little swatches and really be able to feel the weight of the different fabrics. And when you're buying online, be in tune to the descriptions that they give for the fabrics. If they say something is a heavyweight twill, be really cautious about what you make out of that, because it's going to be really stiff and thick. So even something like pants, you're not really going to want to make that out of a medium or a medium. Maybe that would be kind of the cusp, but you're not going to want to make pants out of a heavyweight twill because they're going to feel really bulky. Perhaps a slim skirt, you could get away with it, or something like a utility jacket, or even a heavyweight twill would be good for making something like a bag, like a tote bag or something, where a lightweight twill is going to be a lot better for something like pants or a pleated skirt where you're going to have more bulk. So pay attention to the descriptions that online stores give you about the fabrics. They can teach you a lot, and they can be very helpful for choosing fabric. Tip number 2, know your body and know your body shape. I know that a lot of us can have insecurities about our bodies, and so kind of analyzing our bodies can be a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit scary sometimes. But when you're sewing, it's really important to know your body and analyze your body in a way that is a little bit detached almost. To just analyze it kind of as a shape or an object, and don't judge it for what it is. Just look at it so you can know how to better fit it and to know what styles are going to look best on it. So to be honest and open and non-judgmental about the shape that your body is. So I don't have the smallest waist in the world, and almost everyone in my family just carries, if you have any extra weight at all, we carry it in our hips and our thighs. So for me, that's just really important to know for fitting myself. I also, and my great-grandmother did as well, we have really narrow shoulders. So we're kind of pear-shaped. We're very narrow at the top, and then we go out at the bottom. It is what it is. Every shape can be beautiful and is beautiful. So it's just really important to step back, be non-judgmental, and just judge your body for what shape it is and say, how can I best dress the shape that I am? So this is really important for knowing like what patterns are going to look good on you, or once you get a little bit more experienced fitting yourself, to know how you can take a style that might not inherently be quite as flattering and adjust it to make it flattering for your particular body shape. So know your body, and if you have larger hips and a really narrow waist, really small waist, and there's a big difference between the two, then a pencil skirt might not be the most flattering on you. You might want to go for something more like a half circle skirt, or something with some pleats or something to kind of break things up a little bit. But yeah, so it's knowing your body shape is really important. For me, I know that when I started off, just with my proportions and with my waist and my hips and everything, and how short torsoed I am, I tend to look best in dresses that have waistbands as opposed to dresses that don't have waistbands, or at least they're a lot easier to fit. So the first several dresses that I made dresses that had waistbands built into the design, or I would shorten the bodice and add a midriff section. Once I was more confident in fitting my body shape, then I could kind of step out, and I've made several dresses that do not have waistbands, and I've still been really happy with them. However, it was based on the experience that I gained making the things that I was confident looked good on my body shape that I was able to learn how to fit the things that were a little bit harder to get to look good. Tip number 3, make a mock-up. I cannot say this enough. Making a mock-up is so important. There have been so many times that I have been bitten because I have not made a mock-up, and I have decided to just jump right in to my lovely fashion fabric, and it has not turned out for the better. It's so important to make a mock-up because there are certain fitting changes that you need to make and that are super easy to make that you cannot make after you've cut a garment out. There are things that you have to change about the pattern before you cut out the fabric. For instance, I'm very petite, and I'm especially very petite in my shoulders and arm region, my kind of upper bodice area. I almost always have to shorten, especially if it's a modern pattern. Vintage patterns don't run quite as big, but I still usually have to make some adjustments. But especially modern patterns, I always have to shorten this area. So I always have to take a little slice out of my pattern through the armhole and across the front. Otherwise, my armhole is way too low and I don't have good movement, and it just looks really big and sloppy. That's a really easy thing to change before you cut your fabric out. It's really easy to change in your pattern. But once you've cut your fabric, especially if you've already cut your sleeve, it's almost impossible to make that change. So make a mock-up. Definitely make a mock-up. There are just, like I said, you can get such a better fit if you make those fit changes to your mock-up before you cut out your fabric. I really cannot stress that enough. It will take your sewing game up so much higher if you get the fit right before you jump into actually making the project. Tip number 4, finish your seams. This was a game changer for me, at least. It might be different depending on your personality and how you feel about things, but for me, I was very fortunate that one of my grandpa's lovely friends decided to kind of get out of sewing, and she gave me her serger. And once I was finally brave enough to start using it, because sergers can be intimidating, my sewing game leveled up exponentially, because I was putting that much more time into finishing the inside and knowing that the garment would last even after I washed it made me focus on the details of making the garments even more, because I knew it was something that would last. It's just a mind game almost, but it was a game changer for me when I started caring about what the inside looked like as well as the outside. And tip number 5, take your time. I know that, at least for me, I tend to be a procrastinator, and if I want to make a garment for a specific event or a holiday, I tend to procrastinate and not start working on it until the last minute. But it's really, really important to take your time. Give yourself enough time so that you're not tempted to cut corners and hurry through things that are going to make it more likely that you make mistakes, for one thing, when you're hurrying, and cutting corners can lead to a less polished and nice finished result. So definitely give yourself enough time. This is something that I constantly struggle with. I'm constantly preaching it to myself that I need to give myself enough time, start on a project soon enough, and don't procrastinate on it. But it really, really does make a huge difference. When you give yourself enough time, you're able to really think through each step that you're doing. It gives you more time to thoroughly read through the instructions and get a good idea of what you're doing and how you're going to do each step, instead of just rushing through kind of with only half of an idea how you're going to do things. And then if you hit a snag and you kind of have a problem that you have to fix, you have time to do that instead of completely going off the rails, and then you're trying to hurry through problem solving, and that's never a good idea. So yeah, give yourself enough time. Take your time, enjoy the process, and your finished garments will be better for that. And then a bonus tip that I just thought of is practice, practice, practice. You will get better as you make more things. So kind of give yourself that leniency a little bit to know that if you're just starting off, yeah, in a couple years your garments are going to look a lot better than they look now, and that's okay. I at least have trouble being a beginner at things. I want my stuff to look perfect right away. I'm definitely a perfectionist. But yeah, my things that I make now look a lot nicer than they did 3 years ago. And that's okay. You can be proud of looking at your garments now compared to where you started and seeing how much better quality they are now and how much you've improved in your skills. So practice, 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 and don't give up, and don't get discouraged, because you will get better. All right, and there are my 5 tips for successful sewing. I hope that you find these helpful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. And let me know in the comments below, do you have any other tips that I did not mention here? I would love to know that. So leave them in the comments, and if I get enough, maybe I'll do a part 2 of comments of sewing tips from my viewers. So that would be a fun video idea, I think. So if you have tips that I did not mention, like I said, leave them in the comments below. And if you have not subscribed already, make sure you hit the subscribe button down there and hit the bell button so you're notified every time I upload a new video. And yeah, happy sewing, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!